Welcome, everyone. We are so glad that you are joining us. I'm so excited to introduce our special guest today, Mary Sise. Mary Sise is a pioneer in the field of energy psychology, an author, international speaker, and the creator of the soul weaving process. For over 20 years, she has been personally trained in energy healing by Her Holiness Sai Ma and serves as the director of Sai Ma's Magdalena Healing Program. Mary, it is such an honor to introduce you. Thank you so much for joining us. Welcome.
Oh, thank you so much for having me here. I love the gift.
So excited. So we have seen you on the Shift Network working with tapping on many, many different topics, but we have not actually heard you speak much yet about grief. So what is your interest in this topic and why is it so important to talk about right now?
Well, for me, it's really not a topic I speak on very often, but I have to tell you lately, and some of you who are listening might have the same experience yourself. It's like it keeps showing up. It keeps showing up. And I realized that personally for me, grief, death especially, was a pivotal piece of how I got to where I am now. When I was 7 years old as a little girl, I had a baby sister who was 9 months old. And I can remember walking down the stairs and my mother meeting me at the basement of the bottom of the stairway and telling me that my sister had died. And it was my baby sister. Okay. And so I began to cry. And I think it was my grandmother. I don't know who exactly said it, but somebody said to me, Mary Teresa, don't upset your mother. And I have to tell you, in that moment, I fragmented. I didn't cry. And from that point on, I actually could almost say my childhood totally flipped. Okay. I now turned into mommy's little helper. I have no needs. I don't need anything. And I'm sure energetically I could sense my mother's loss and her grief and the family. There are other things going on in the family, whatever. And I have 11 brothers and sisters. So picture this gig in the 50s. Okay. So but I changed in that point. I became very much I can do this. And it really propelled, if you think of like your life is going in a certain way and then a shock like that happens, all of a sudden now I'm way over here, just about running the planet or any other thing I can get into and, always having an opinion and always can tell everybody else what to do and no needs, no tears. It was almost impossible for me to cry. And now fast forward when I was almost 40, when I had another sister go to deliver her baby and almost died on the table. And so that propelled me into a whole nother section of my life where we were going to heal this thing. We were going to use energy. That got me into energy and meridians and tapping on your face. And like from being soccer mom to tapping lady or whatever. And then she died when I was almost 50. And that cracked my world. And that started me on a spiritual path. Over 20 years, I was going, trying to learn what is that? Why do we die? Why would you take a child like my sister and a mother? Religion, everything failed me. And it really started my search. And then when I combine that with all the energy work I know on how to shift energy and clear shock and traumatic deaths and things like that, it just actually all of a sudden made sense. And so that's why I'm talking about death right now.
Yeah, that's such an important topic. And, Mary, I feel like that there's not a lot of openness around this topic, especially I think in this Western culture. Death is looked at very differently than I see other cultures and how they handle death. And then, of course, there's the grief aspect that you're talking about. And then you going down sort of that pathway and that memory of how your first experience around that and how it affected you and the people around you and how it was dealt with, right, is firsthand. So for you, we often hear about, the 5 stages of grief, and how that impacts us. So, denial, anger, bargaining, depression, and acceptance. Beyond these 5 stages, what else have you learned about grief through your personal, experience in your work?
Well, when it's done I would say more in a planned way, so like the guy is 80 and, he's been sick for this long and you've said your goodbyes and everything that would be, I would say, a traditional, there's a little bit of denial. There's some denial at the first and we can go through those stages. There's some also bargaining, like, please don't let him die. I'll do that or whatever. And then, those stages, but where it gets, I want to expand it for people is to really understand there's way more than this. First of all, when there's a shock and a sudden death, your brain freezes. This is what we know about the brain. For some people, they're frozen in time. They can't move past, he just dropped dead on the floor, or he's too young to die, like my sister, like you're in this numb, no, like you're screaming no, and this shock, and that impacts the brain. And so there's that aspect of it, which is significant. And there's a way to heal that. It's really what I want everyone to know. This can be healed, okay? But there's the shock. Oftentimes, now I've worked with so many people who have this guilt. There's one client who, child, she was suicidal a lot, and she would call her mother, and her mother would do this and that, and she, blah, blah. And there was one night when she called, and the mother just, I'm not going to talk to her. I can't, everybody's advising her, blah, blah, blah. I don't know what, but she came to me and she didn't go down there. And that was the night the girl suicided, and she found her. She cannot get that out of her head. And she feels so guilty that it's like disloyal to move on. It's disloyal for her to ever be happy again. And there's no framework around, anything. So often there's guilt, there's regrets. You didn't get to say something. There's that energy in there. It just compounds it. Some people actually have shame when someone dies, as if they're being punished by God or some God thing. And people will talk about this feeling. Sometimes they feel insane. Like, I see him, I hear him or her. And sometimes when there's been a traumatic death, they are still in the room where they got the diagnosis, or where they can't get out of the room. And again, this is part of like soul weaving and things like that, where people in trauma are fragmented in time. They're frozen in time. And so they can't, that's a whole nother aspect. And then the other, this lonely isolation, this emptiness you feel oftentimes is in death. And so there's all these other energies, I call it energies, that are around, that are in you, that are in your field, that we have to take into consideration in order for some people, not everybody, but some people to heal. So death isn't the same. It's like, go through your stages and you're out of here. For everybody, it's distinct given that. Does that make sense?
Absolutely. Thank you so much for that. So let me ask you this, Mary, does it make a difference how the loss or death occurred? Okay. So like, for example, if the person was young or older, or the death was unexpected, right? Like a shock, or versus like what you talked about, oh, I know this person's going to pass soon, having that time to prepare. And what other factors would come into play?
There's different issues based on when it happens, and also based on how old you are when it happens. Okay. So for example, if we look at a child and their brain isn't that developed, okay, especially under the age of 7, a lot of this has to do with the brain. I'm going to probably say that a million times, but under the age of 7. So it's like he's gone. It's like a bird came and plucked him out, and he's never coming back. And children can really create all sorts of fantasies, and they don't understand. And then mom is just so upset that she can't really comfort them in the way they need to be comforted, because she's empty herself in grieving. So the age at which someone dies. So like for me to be told under the age of 7, don't upset your mother, that in such an emotional moment, whatever's said in that kind of a moment goes right into you. Like a program, like a hypnotic program, we could say. More so than if she said it to me when I was 13, I would have told her, forget it, But I was 7 and I didn't know. I probably didn't hardly know what death was, So it depends on the age when you go through it. it depends. And of course, we all think, oh, they're old, they had a great life. So we can kind of write it off in our, especially us Westerners, in our Western way. But if it's a young person, like my other sister died and had 2 kids. Why does a mother die? What's wrong with this planet? I was just like screaming to the heavens at that point. And everything I knew about those new agey sayings like you create your own reality and all that other blah, blah, it was like incomplete because how could you tell me we created this? We were doing this and this, So yeah, the age, there's so many compounding factors. Another big thing that can influence how you move out of grief is what other losses have you had? Because think of your mind like your subconscious mind. What's not your unconscious? It was like a big library of everything you've been through. So when my second sister died, it went to the library of this is the end of the world. Like this is horrible. Like it's like a librarian comes, oh, somebody died. Here's all the library books I have from your life on death or on loss or somebody leaving you or abandonment. So all of that is in the grief. So sometimes you'll see somebody where they've had their mother died when they were little and now their partner dies. And it's a huge grief reaction that it's really hard because it's not just about this. It's what else is in that library that she really wasn't able to heal. And that was the same with me, with my sister.
Okay. Thank you for, there are so many factors, right, that can contribute to that. So with that being said, how do you work with grief, right? So, and this is going to be related, I know you infuse energy with that. So how do you work with grief related energies, shocks, and all that you discussed so far using energy psychology? Okay, great question. So some of it depends on where the person is. And this is for everybody that's listening. If you're trying to support somebody that's gone through it. So at first there's like this, the denial. Again, if there's shock in there, it makes it more intense. And so at first, energetically, what you want to do is support energetically. So at first, when I'm with somebody with grief, I'm known for tapping. We do tapping, blah, 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 whatever. And tapping works, okay? But at first, that's not maybe the right time to do it. At first, I'm there. My heart is open. If you know any of the energetic modalities that use that, like Reiki or I use Magdalena healing or something, I can just emanate those frequencies and just be with somebody. And so for those of you, you would be more with the energy field of the aura. Just send light to the aura. Send prayers to people. That works. Okay. So, and they won't know what it is, but they'll feel supported. Okay. So oftentimes I'll do more, or I'll send them to somebody who might give them a massage. Just quiet your nervous system down. Your brain is flipping out. You're numb, your vagus nerve, everything we know now about the body. So energetically, I would more support the aura. And if I'm going to do the tapping, I would use the method of tapping where we use the meridian system, but you use touch and breathe. So instead of tapping the meridians, which is too jarring to the body at first, I would just touch the meridian and or they would touch their meridians and do tapping. Breathe in and out with each breath down each one of the points. Each one of the meridian points goes to different emotions in Chinese medicine. So that's why you're tapping on different points. Again, it's a way to just quiet the body down, quiet the body, and help them thaw a little bit. Because you see that numbing and denial it's a little, you could think of numbing as Novocaine, like when you're in excruciating pain, like give me some Novocaine or so if you got a bad tooth, it's the numbing kind of like protects you from having to deal with it all, and especially if it's a sudden shock one. So you can do that. Another energy method you could do is to like rub your hands together and then hold the front and back of your head
And you do that for a little bit and just say soothing words. I'll get through this, or one day at a time, or just those kinds of things to quiet the body mind down, the brain down, the vagus nerve. I mean, like get things calm again. Okay. And then depending on what else would happen, I would say then next you would move more into the day-to-day stuff with the kids. Like, excuse me, the day-to-day stuff that the person has to work with. You know, she might have kids. If it's sudden, you might not know where the will is. You might not know financially what to do. So it's really just one foot in front of the other. And you would use energy. So if you're a friend and you stay with your friend, check in on him or her. What can I take off your plate for you? Bring them food. It's the day to day to day to day. And eventually some of the numbness will wear off. And that's when some other things will come in. And as I said earlier, they sometimes think they're going crazy because they see the person, because it's scary, because all this is going on and it's not crazy. And then there's the loneliness at this stage, you know, just where it's just you're lonely. You think he's going to come through the door. There's something missing, and something is missing. Energetically, the soul is moving into the other realms. Okay, so there isn't, and it's almost like the energy has to unwind. And if you've been together so long, even if you knew and he's old and whatever, it doesn't matter. There's time for that. And this isn't all losses. This could even be, we could be speaking of divorce too. You find out he's cheating on you. That's another shock, you know, or when you find out he's not coming home or something shocking. And yet so it takes time for the brain to get it. It takes time for the brain to get it. Give yourself 30 days, 40 days, whatever you need. Eventually you'll feel that. That will shift. That's actually normal. Then you've got trauma in there. It's even more complicated. Then as you come out of this, so you what begins to happen again is when you think, if you've got shock and trauma in it, okay, so you think about your loved one. And your brain, instead of going back to maybe your wedding day or the birth of your child, if it's a child and a beautiful day, and how much your brain goes to the shock, because that's how the brain is wired. So it goes to the day he died. It goes to the phone call. It goes to you sitting in the doctor's office getting that first diagnosis, all the different shocks you have. And so people will say to me, I can't even, every time I think of him, I have a panic attack. Every time I think of him, I go there. That's trauma and that's shock. So that takes a different type of work. And so the next part of the work is to really move through the trauma, get the trauma process. So you can find somebody who does some trauma processing things, because you've been traumatized. The brain's been shocked. Okay. And then that's where a lot of the work is. Does that make sense for you?
Absolutely. So much wisdom there. I love how you mentioned with the meridians, how the meridians lead back to a certain, stage or emotion is what you said.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Certain meridians, certain emotions. One of the 5 stages that you mentioned, of grief that you mentioned before is anger. And you speak of a crisis in faith. So
Mm-hmm.
how does this play a role, or how does that play a role into the grieving process?
Mm-hmm. So anger is interesting. Though sometimes will be a lot of anger in the beginning, or why me, but you have to get to the shock, in my experience, before we get to the real fun work. I love when they're angry at God, when they're finally ready to rip it and to really feel this anger at why did this happen? Why, I call it, like, I scream at the heavens, like, what the heck is going on? Just this screaming and this anger at God, because then I know they're really getting it. They're moving. The energy's moving. Okay. It is, for me, I can speak for myself and for many of the clients I have. This is like a crisis. This is like a crisis of faith. Like, I always thought I believed in God, or God, I was under some lucky star or something. I don't know what I thought, but because I just had this can do, I don't need anything attitude. But what will happen is, and let me say it this way, what you learned, and probably as a child, or hopefully you learned more than better than I did, but other places, doesn't answer the question. Like God took him, or it was his time, or all those things. You just want to bring people's necks. Like, shut up, stop saying that. And who wants God if you're just going to come here and take things? And so you really have to search. It's really, you'll find some of the traditional stuff, it just falls short for you. And that's the beginning of an opening for you to really search, to read other things, to read other traditions. To one of my clients, I said to her the other day to read something, and she said, I can't read. And I said, okay, maybe watch YouTube videos. There's lots of YouTube videos on near-death experiences and what's it like. But sometimes that makes them even madder because the loved one they know goes back to the oneness and the all that is and the bliss. And we're still down here on this crazy planet with these 5 kids or whatever, or bills to pay, and you left me without money, or you left me with no money, or like you're up there having fun. It really can piss a girl off, let me tell you. But you have to really work through all that and learn about soul and karma, contracts, and broaden what you learned that's no longer serving you. So it's like these clothes that are just too tight. They don't fit anymore for some people. And so at this point, that's what happened to me. I just had to go. I had to look elsewhere. These answers are just not cutting it. How can you take a mother from her children? I really was mad. And so that's what started my search. And that's a really good time because that's when they're learning other things and you can have conversations about that. But the really tricky thing is you cannot do that before you've done the trauma work, because otherwise it's spiritual bypass. And they never get to the anger and the rage that's in them, or the deep sadness, or the guilt, or the ththings they said to them the night before that they wish they hadn't said. So there's different ways you can work through this process. But when they get there, that's when I find that all the things they thought, if I'm a good person, I over and over I hear, why did God take him or her? There's so many bad people on the planet. Why don't you take them? As if it's a contest of who gets to go first or whatever, like it just, but it's this like just this anger and this. And so the ability to express that and be heard and be listened to, that's what's so, so powerful in the healing. Yeah.
Absolutely. I want to echo that when with the anger, it makes me understand how powerful going through that process, even when anger is present, can be, and how transformative it can be. And it's really just an opportunity. And there's always opportunity and time for healing. Anger, I think, to me, when we infuse that fire element, because a lot of us have that rage or that anger, like you mentioned, fire is the most transformative element. So I can see why going through this process can be so transformative.
And the funny thing about the anger at God, they're afraid to be angry at God because they think, because we all think if I'm just good things are going to happen. I mean, that's like child kind of thinking, if I do this, I'll get an A on my report card. If I do this, bad things aren't going to happen. And I know for me, back to being a little girl. So if I'm a good girl and I help my mother out, God's not just going to come. I'm not going to be a burden like my sister was sick and just take me. Like that was my thinking, again, not necessarily conscious, but deep in my subconscious. And it pushed me in a way that got me to do a lot of things. Great. It wasn't a bad idea to have that be my theory. It's just not accurate. It's got nothing to do with that, whether I'm good or not good, whether you're dying or not dying. It has to do with many more things. And so, then I could just ease up on having to, not that I was a good little girl. I don't mean that, but I was, in charge. I didn't need anybody, including God. I used to have this funny saying, my prayer was, Lord, make me an instrument of your peace in an advisory capacity. Like, Like I could figure it out. Don't worry. I got this part of the earth done. You take care of over there. Like I need nothing. Like really? So
Beautiful. So I think, Mary, it's safe to say that we've all experienced grief to some capacity,
yes.
or we at least know somebody around us who may be going through a grieving process. So how can then we best support someone who's going through a grieving process?
Yeah. Yeah, that's sometimes the hardest part, because we don't, as Westerners, as you started, we don't think about death. We don't want to think about death, especially if it's somebody our age, especially if it's, it's like, oh, we, and then I could even say for myself, when my sister died, that was the mother, the older one, I cried like a baby, like I sobbed, and I never cry, and I kept thinking, it's breaking my heart, but it wasn't breaking my heart. What it was doing was breaking the protection around my heart. And I had to look at that. And I became more and more capable of being there with someone in grieving situations, because now I really could feel more with my heart more open. So being there, moving past as best you can as a friend, your own discomfort with people's sadness. And as you don't even need to say anything. It's just being with somebody, keeping your heart open. It's just and often what everyone will tell me is, the first 5 days, 10 days, everybody's there, and then 3 weeks later, everybody's gone, or 2 weeks later. Check in with them. You don't really even. They just, what can I do for you? I'm here. You're not alone. Those kinds of things, especially in the beginning, and then. I know probably everybody knows it, but don't say things like, well, you have other children, or you'll get married again. I mean, people say sometimes the nuttiest thing. Think before you open your mouth. I know you can't get it, because if you haven't gone through anything, you can't get it fully. But ask how can I help you? What would you need now? I'm going to bring you dinner. Those kinds of things. So they're not alone. The loneliness after someone dies is intense. So they're not alone, and they feel love. They feel it from you. It's not necessarily words. So those kinds of things. Don't rush somebody. Don't compare somebody to somebody else, because you don't know their story. You don't know what this grief is triggered in them that they haven't healed yet. Like I have one client who it was a horrible shock when he died and whatever, but she had so many other earlier losses. Like her mother had left when she was a kid. She was so triggered all over the place, this loneliness and this helplessness. You don't know what somebody's being triggered. So don't judge. Just, don't compare the grieving person to another grieving person. And those of you that are grieving, get support from people who have been through it. That will save you. Because otherwise, you'll feel like you're going a little crazy, and you'll never get better. If you want to see somebody who's done and gone through it. And support groups are interesting, because sometimes there's people there that have had a lot of shocks and they never got over it. And they've been in this support group for 17 years or something. That's really depressing if you're a young person and you're in that group, right? And so find groups with people your age, but people who have moved through it, and distinguish between shock and between grief. It's different. If you don't clear the shock, you will be like the war vets. You'll be like everybody else with PTSD who hasn't been able to heal it. But there are ways you can heal it, a shock and a trauma. It's a different brain processing thing. So look into tapping. You can look into EMDR. There's many ways. You need somebody who can help you with the trauma of it. And there's nothing wrong with you. It's your brain stuck.
Beautiful. Thank you for those words of wisdom. I think, we can all be a support system to somebody and help them journey through their process. So thank you for that. Mm-hmm. I would love for you to share with us, an energetic practice to calm the body during this time.
Okay, so let's all take a breath together. We've talked about a lot of things, and probably those on this call or listening to this program have been a little bit triggered. Maybe you're thinking of a loved one or a situation that's been difficult for you. So just take a breath. I'm going to take you through the touch and breathe method so that you can just allow yourself to calm down, right? Notice your body. Notice if there's any distress in it. Maybe it's brought up some feelings that are uncomfortable. Just accept that that's there and still in you. Maybe some leftover grief or sadness, anger, some shock. Whatever it is, just own it. Notice where your body is holding it. Is your stomach tight? Is your chest tight? Is your heart broken? And then I want you to take your hands and cross them across your chest and rub here. There's a soft spot on your chest right here. You can rub that. You can just accept that's where you are. We say when we do tapping with it, we're not going to do tapping, we're going to do some breathing with it. But even though there's despair in me, or there's guilt in me, or regret, or there's shock in me, I accept myself. It's just accept. Even though I feel numb, whatever it is, I just accept myself. Even though I feel uncomfortable, I accept myself. And then touch the side of your hand right here. So small intestine meridian, actually, point. And I want you to take a deep breath in and out as you say, I'm choosing to heal this distress, or to release this stress or this guilt or this grief. All the roots and origins of it and all that it means that does to me. Take a deep breath in and out. I am choosing to release this distress, all the roots and origins of it, and all that it means and does to me. Deep breath in and out. I'm choosing to release this, all the roots and origins of it, and all that it means and does to me. Now we're going to activate your meridian system. So you put your fingers right here on your eyebrows. Each one of these meridians is different. This is for sadness, your bladder meridian. And just take a deep breath in and out. And then this side of your eyes. And take a deep breath in and out. Breathe all the way in, especially to the part of your body that's contracted, under your eyes. Deep breath in and out. And under your nose, deep breath in and out. Under your lip, a deep breath in and out. You can even imagine this, just breathing this distress out. Right here at your collarbone, as if you have a skinny tie on, you're going to put your fingers right there. And take a deep breath in and out. Now bring your fingers, like your hand, 4 inches below your armpit. And I'll see if I can show this better to you. Right here. It's usually right there. And just take a deep breath in and out. And then under your chest, right here. Deep breath in and out. And now hands like a laser at the top of your head. Make sure all your fingers are touching, and take a deep breath in and out. You want to make sure you're getting all the fingers. Grief is actually lung meridian and it's on the thumb. It's actually, we'll do this one together right here. You can release some of your grief as you touch your thumb, the top of your thumb. Take a deep breath in and out. It's just a very basic, soft tapping sequence that should quiet you down a little bit. If it didn't and something else came up, you just do another round of it. You can do as many as you want and see if your body will just quiet down. You'll be able to experience a little more peace. If you have shock, trauma, you probably need the eye movements in it to process the shock, which is a longer version of the tapping sequences that we have. So, but for now, just using this to quiet your system down. And you can program in anything like one day at a time, depending on where you are, or it's safe for me to be happy again, or what new information you want that you just don't have in your system yet.
Wow. Thank you so much, Mary. That was amazing. I thoroughly enjoyed that. That is so helpful. And this is so many reasons why upgrading to purchase premium or getting your premium access, these amazing teachings, right? Coming back to them. So you can click on your screen to purchase premium access to the summit, which includes unlimited access to all the summit sessions, transcripts, bonuses, and coming back to these amazing sessions like we had with Mary. Mary, I want to thank you so much. Given what you've talked about, what is one thing you'd like to leave us with today, or as a next step for our listeners, something that we can do to make changes in our own lives?
Well, for me, the biggest message I always wish to leave you, there's nothing wrong with you. There's nothing wrong with you. Your souls, you're in a physical body. You have a brain that's wired for survival, so it goes into shock sometimes. It panics, it's whatever. And you can fix this. You can reprogram this. You can get the shock out so that once you free yourself from all of this, you're able to have more of a heart-to-heart connection with your loved one rather than a trauma one that, you can't seem to get away from. And to me, that's the goal of this, so that you have this heart-to-heart, you're able to free their soul to go to the higher dimensions, which is where they are to go. And then, but you always hold them, they're in this heart-to-heart connection, because love never dies. Love never dies. And the person has just changed form. They still exist. That's the good news. Blessings to all of you.
I want to thank you so much, Mary, from my heart to yours. Thank you so much for your time, your wisdom. Thank you. And wow, what an amazing session with Mary Sise. Before we all depart, I want to leave you all with these amazing words from Rumi to echo the teachings of Mary today. Grief can be the garden of compassion. If you keep your heart open through everything, your pain can become your greatest ally in your life's search for love and wisdom. Words of Rumi. Thank you so much, everyone.